As Eagles training camp fast approaches, questions still surround some of the most intriguing players in position battles like Nakobe Dean, Quinyon Mitchell, John Ross, and a whole bunch more. So I sat down with Eagles radio broadcast legend Merrill Reese to see who he's most looking forward to watching at practice next week and why this might be the most exciting Eagles team he's ever seen. I'm Thomas Mott. This is the Thomas Mott Show. We've been waiting for the official date for the Birds' first actual training camp practice for a while now, and what do you know? Finally, this morning, we have the full details. Philly, of course, reports next Tuesday on July 23rd, but that's just kind of a get in the building, meet and greet, get ready sort of day. Their first actual practice will happen one day later on Wednesday the 24th, which will include a pre-practice press conference from Nick Sirianni at 9:30 a.m., followed by their first official, without pads though, practice at 10 a.m. And I'll, of course, have full coverage of the Eagles' first actual training camp practice on that Wednesday, although don't be surprised if the Eagles don't really do much. It's probably going to be a very light, no-pad walkthrough, still though sub for the latest updates. What's not surprising, though, is the new revelations from Lane Johnson on the Kay Adams show yesterday, where he said that Jason Kelce has been at the Eagles facility all offseason long, even more than most current players have been the past couple of months, which immediately had people thinking, oh, he's going to be a coach, he wants to coach the Eagles, be the next O-line coach, replace Stout, be on Stout's staff, who knows? I'm sure that eventually will happen. Honestly, though, I think he just enjoys hanging out with the guys, eating free food, and using the Eagles gym for free. For me, the bigger takeaway from Johnson's interview with Adams has to be his take on the Birds' stacked team as a whole heading into 2024.
I think when you look at your roster in the spring, you can tell what type of talent level you have, what type of ability you might have. So the eyeball test is there, and there's certain seasons where when you have a loaded roster. So this is one of those years, and obviously the great thing about the NFL, you got to go prove it every week. So we're eager to do that, but just from my experience, we have a blend of older guys, a good young nucleus, hungry, and that's what you need. So really high energy in the building.
And of course, don't just take Lane Johnson's words for it. ESPN finished their top 10 players at every position, according to NFL execs and coaches, scouts. Of course, Philadelphia ended up with 6 top 10 players at all the positions on their football team. That's third most behind the Ravens, Lions, and Chiefs, tied with 7 each, and the Niners on top with 9. Now, A.J. Brown, of course, is obviously one of the top players who made the list, so in honor of that, plus the fact we had Merrill Reese on the show, that's coming up in just 1 second, let's go ahead and give away this A.J. Brown Kelly Green t-shirt, the logo, the number, the name on the back. I love this. All you gotta do, be a subscriber, hit the like button on this video, go down below in the comment section, and comment Brown. I'll randomly select one of you guys to go ahead and win this on a show later next week. Now, when it comes to Merrill Reese, there isn't really an introduction needed. I mean, every single Eagle fan knows who he is, recognizes the iconic voice, and of course, have heard him call some of the biggest moments in Eagles history.
Quick to quick, he's gonna go 25-40, 35-40, midfield 45-40, 35-40, Mike Quick, touchdown, the Eagles win. The ball is spotted, the kick is blocked, the Eagles have the football, running with the football is Matt Ware, touchdown, Matt Ware.
Ball is spotted, the kick is away, and the kick is...
And the Eagles win! He's back again. He steps up. He's hit. He stumbles. He is throwing it deep for the end zone, and it is batted around and incomplete. And the game is over. The game is over. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you!
But at 81 years of age and over 47 years of being the voice of the Birds, he's recently greatly limited the amount of interviews he's done on a yearly basis. So of course, shout out to Justin Brown for setting up this interview. Follow his Instagram, link down below. But I got 35 plus minutes with Merrill Reese, and we talked about everything. Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, training camp, who's he excited to watch. But at the very end, we got about 10 minutes all about his broadcast career, behind the scenes, what it's like to be the voice of the Birds. It was an absolute privilege and blast, and maybe my favorite interview I've done over the course of the offseason. Hope you guys enjoy. It's starting. I mean, geez, we're 6 days away, and I'm very curious. I've interviewed a couple of Eagles the past couple of weeks, Brandon Graham, Zach McPherson. I always start the show by asking them, guys, what have you been doing over the course of the offseason to get ready for training camp? Any fun trips, anything going on? You're not suiting up next Tuesday for the start of training camp, but obviously you're preparing. What's the great Merrill Reese been doing during the non-football days the past couple of months?
Golf, and a lot of golf.
There you go.
You have charity events. There are a lot of charity events involved, but it's also my number one hobby. So I do play a lot. And then last week we took the family up to Hershey, to the Hotel Hershey. So we had the kids at the amusement parks, and we had a great day, great time with our kids and our grandchildren.
Curious what the most famous golf course you've ever golfed at. While we're on the topic.
Well, I've played in a lot of them, but my favorite is Merrill.
Okay, there you go. There you go. How's the handicap looking right now?
It's right there.
Okay.
I'm a mid-handicap golfer. I play well enough to enjoy it.
There you go. Do you still stay on the course even during the Eagles season, or is it more of a summertime activity?
Well, it's not just summertime. I mean, I'll play all through the spring, and if you get a day with 50 to go, 45 degrees and sunshine in the winter, I'll get out there and play if the wind isn't too bad. But basically, once you get into the season, if the players have a day off on a Tuesday, or maybe I have a chance on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday of a home game, I'll still get out as long as the weather is nice.
There you go. I love it. I love it. We mentioned the Eagles training camp starting. I want to quickly ask a question about the anticipation heading into this year. You've been doing this a very long time. There have been a ton of highly anticipated Eagles seasons. This, to me, feels a little bit different based on what happened last year, the Super Bowl in 2022, and all the new additions. Is this the most highly anticipated training camp that you've seen in a long time, or am I a little bit, overblowing it?
I think with the fan base like you have here in Philadelphia, every training camp is highly anticipated. Now, some to a greater extent than others. I mean, when you have a team coming off a bad losing season, a 4-win team or a 5-win team, and the expectations are less, that's a different story. But they're still anticipated, and people can't wait for Eagles football. But I would say that based on the fact that this team has made some big changes in the coordinators. They've brought in some highly touted draft choices. You have Saquon Barkley. There are so many new things, and you knew that going into last season, they were perhaps the favorite to go the distance and were disappointing at the end. So I think that this year the enthusiasm is there, as always, and maybe the expectations are just a little bit tempered. You don't want to get carried away. You look at this team, they're a contender. And I think on paper, they're as strong as any team in the NFC. But I always tell people that the NFL is a war of attrition. And when you look at the schedule and you see the Cowboys up there late in the season, I'm not somebody who ever puts W's or L's next to the schedule when it first comes out, because you don't know who's going to be healthy for your team. You don't know who's going to be healthy for the opposition. So it changes during the season.
I'm curious, out of all of the signings that you just mentioned, including the coordinators, I mean, those are two of the biggest signings, Saquon, Bryce Huff, the draft picks, is there one player that got you more excited than the rest that you really are like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe the Eagles got this guy? Well,
I think Saquon would fit into that category because he is one of the great running backs in the National Football League, and he's a 3-down back. They've done a lot of shifting around in the last couple of seasons, and they've had more role players than anything else. But Saquon is that kind of back, and he did well with a Giants line that was not one of the best. You're putting him behind an Eagles line that, with the exception of Jason Kelce, and I know that's a big exception, but I think Cam Jurgens is going to do fine as the young center. I mean, he was handpicked to be Kelce's successor. I still think the offensive line is going to be one of the best. They have the best offensive line coach in Jeff Stoutland. I think Saquon Barkley is going to have a very big year.
I want to go back to last year really quickly because I think you have a really unique take in terms of where you're at in the organization and where you're able to actually, call the games and see everything happening in a different way than a lot of fans who are just watching on TV or listening to on the radio. Is there one thing from last year that you can kind of circle the blame on as to what happened the latter part of the year? Have you kind of figured out exactly what you think was the main problem for Philadelphia in 2023?
Well, they were rolling along. I mean, they were 10-1. And see, this is why I say to you, Tom, that I don't look at the schedule and write W's and L's. If you looked at the schedule last year, you would say perhaps that the two key games, the greatest barometers, were going to be a Monday night game in Kansas City, and then the following week at home against the playoff-bound Buffalo Bills. Well, the Eagles came from behind dramatically in both of those games. They won in the rain, coming from a 10-0 deficit at halftime to beat the Chiefs in Kansas City. And the following week, it was Jalen Hurts in overtime on a quarterback draw up the middle to beat the Bills. And they're 10-1 at that point. They look like the best team, not in the NFC, but the best team in the NFL at that point. And then came the 49ers. And the game started quickly for the Eagles with a couple of drives, but they got field goals instead of touchdowns, and then the roof fell in. And I almost felt as if the 49ers had established a template and they exposed the Eagles' weaknesses in that game, and everybody else piled on. Eagles could not pick up the blitz well. The offense became predictable. There were a lot of reasons, but I think it all started with that game.
Yeah, it really does. And it's a great point there on the Bills and the Chiefs. I mean, those were two games. You mentioned not putting W's ahead of the actual time. I don't think any of us would have said, yeah, win against the Chiefs, win against the Bills. That's going to be easy. And then the hard games would be the Giants or the Cardinals. And yet that's just how, everything fell last year. And it was crazy how the entire collapse actually went down. I want to talk about Jalen Hurts, though, briefly. You mentioned the quarterback draw in the Bills game. I think maybe his best game was the Buffalo Bills game, how he did coming back in overtime. He looked absolutely fantastic in the rain. And, of course, being an Eagles quarterback, he's always under a microscope. He's very polarizing. I actually looked this morning, and I think since you started in 1977, there's been 30 different Eagle quarterbacks that have started or at least played in a game that you have called. What makes Jalen Hurts a little bit different from the 29 others you've seen during your time in Philadelphia?
I mean, I can't go one-on-one. I can't start going back and comparing him to Ron Jaworski or to Randall Cunningham or some of the others. But I can say this. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he is absolutely sensational. I think he's got everything you look for in a young quarterback. He's got the arm. I think people underestimated his arm strength. There's not a pass he can't throw. He's got the athletic ability. He's got it up here. He's very, very bright. He's dedicated. He's a student of the game. He's athletic. He can run. He can do everything. I think he is an outstanding quarterback. I think he's in store for a great season.
We mentioned 30 different quarterbacks. You've seen 10 different head coaches since 1977. I think that shows how great the organization has been in terms of picking head coaches, but 10 different ones. Nick Sirianni, I think a lot of people, including myself, were surprised he was brought back after the 2023 campaign. There were a lot of calls for him to be let go. Do you think it was the right decision to keep Nick Sirianni, and what do you like from him going into 2024?
Listen, he hasn't been a Super Bowl 2 years ago. I mean, that would be dramatic to 1 year after a Super Bowl change coaches. And I think that Nick Sirianni is a bright coach. He's an enthusiastic coach. He communicates very well. See, I think communication is one of the biggest parts of coaching, the ability to get through to people, to have people skills. And I think he has that. And coaches have to surround themselves with the best possible assistants. I remember Dick Vermeil, a lot of things about Dick Vermeil, but one of the things Dick Vermeil said was a coach has to surround himself with assistants good enough to take his job. And I think that's important. And I'm not criticizing anybody in particular, but I think that by bringing in Kellen Moore and adding Vic Fangio, I think you're going to give Nick Sirianni the support that he needs. But I think he's a bright young coach.
I love that thought on bringing in the coordinators that can go ahead and help you out in the communication part of things. In terms of Fangio and Kellen Moore, I've had a hard time trying to figure out if I had to pick who I'm more excited for, because I feel like the defense has needed this kind of elder statesman, been there, done that sort of, no BS, what Jordan Davis said in his press conference a couple of months ago in terms of a DC. But I think Kellen Moore's offense is so unique and something we just haven't really seen since Shane Steichen. Do you have a preference if you had to pick who you're more excited to see work, Kellen Moore or Vic Fangio this year?
Both. Both. I can't say one or the other. I'm excited about seeing the teams. And, the truth of the matter is I've got to go to training camp and watch them day in and day out and see how the install goes. And you can't see offenses and defenses when you go to the OTAs. I mean, they're going through some basic things. But as the summer goes on, not the preseason games, because the preseason games show you nothing. They're vanilla. I'll be surprised if we see any starters in the preseason games. But the day in, day out stuff where you see them working on different things, that's when it will start to materialize. That's when it will start to solidify. So we're away from that yet. But I do think that when you look at Kellen Moore and you look at Vic Fangio, they're going to go with the offense and the defense that suits their personnel. They have their own styles. They have their own things that they like to implement. But I think the big thing is evaluating your talents and then tailoring your schemes to fit your talent.
You mentioned evaluating talent. You're going to be at training camp, watching day in and day out here. I think a lot of people get hung up on Jalen Hurts at training camp and A.J. Brown at training camp, and while obviously they're very important, for me, training camp is all about finding those hidden gems, those people on the roster that, you didn't expect to somehow instantly be an impact player. Travis Fulgham, for instance, a couple of years back was a great example of that. Is there anyone in particular you're really excited to see at training camp this year that maybe the media is not talking about it as much?
Well, really, at this point, you can't tell. When you talk about excited, of course I'm excited about Quinyon Mitchell. Of course I'm excited about Cooper Dejean. But as you go on, I'm excited about Will Shipley, the running back that they picked up, because he had a heck of a college career. So I'm excited about him. I'm excited about some of the young players that you mentioned, some of the Huff coming in this year to see what he has. I don't know. I saw him a little when they played the Jets. But basically, I'm excited about seeing a lot of people, but that becomes more apparent. Now, I'll give you a name. I'll give you a name only because he had such great expectations coming into the league, and that was John Ross. You remember, he was the fastest 40 time ever at the draft, and yet his career was disappointing, mostly because of injuries. Now, he looked pretty quick. He looked like he had that great speed when I watched him in the OTAs. So I'm anxious to see if he can rekindle something there. There was a tall wide receiver, a later draft choice, Johnny Wilson. Anxious to see him. So you can point to guys more on the offensive side than on the defensive side. Because, first of all, there's no hitting in the OTAs, and there's very little hitting in the training camp, but at least you get to see a lot of one-on-one drills.
You mentioned all of those offensive players. John Ross is someone that I don't think anybody expected to be a name that popped up during OTAs, and you mentioned OTAs is very, very vanilla. It's hard to gauge from, but if he can do it in the preseason and do it during padded practices and joint practices with the Patriots, I'm excited too to see exactly what John Ross. And if he has that speed, the Eagles have always wanted that deep vertical speedster to take the top off the defense, and who knows, maybe he's going to be that guy. There are a lot of
Wes Watkins had speed too. That's why they kept him out there, and he was never really productive. I'll give you a defensive player.
Okay.
I might watch because it seemed like during the OTAs he was coming up with an interception every game, every practice, and that was Isaiah Rodgers, who comes over from Indianapolis after a suspension. But he looks like somebody who could compete for a starting job.
I love it. Isaiah Rodgers, too, another big name. I was talking to him whenever I was at the Devontae Smith Celebrity Softball game. He seems really focused. He seems, he had the mistake with the whole suspension thing. He was working out the entire season, not playing last year. There's something about him this year. I'm with you there. I'm very excited to see what he can do at cornerback. I want to ask quickly, we've been obviously very positive about where the Eagles are at right now. Is there one weakness on offense or defense that has you a little bit concerned? Right now, I think for me, it's linebacker. I love Devin White. Devin White didn't have a great year last year. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what he can do during training camp. Is there a positional group that has you just a little bit concerned going into next week?
Not based on the roster. Again, Devin White had outstanding seasons after he came into the league, and then he dropped off. So he is somebody to keep an eye on. But and I'm also excited to see a healthy and Nakobe Dean, because you know what he was like coming out of Georgia. I mean, he was maybe the top linebacker in the country, and the Eagles, we thought, stole him, where they didn't have to pick him in the first and second round. And yet each year he's come out, and he's bright, and you know he's athletic. But Buddy Ryan used to say, go back to Buddy Ryan, who used to say, durability is as important as ability, and he hasn't been durable yet. But if he stays healthy, maybe this is his year and he can make a big impact.
I love it. Having great linebackers is something Philadelphia has not had that many of in the past. You can kind of, point to the Jeremiah Trotters of the world, or the D'Amico Ryans, at least during my generation, of course, well before that as well. But if they can get two good ones, go ahead.
You're bringing up some names now because I'm anxious to see Trot Jr.
There you go.
And he had a great college career, but he fell in the draft, and the Eagles grabbed him in the 5th round. I'm anxious to see young Trot. I really am.
I am too.
He was a bigger fan of his father than I was.
What an awesome thing for Philadelphia to do, too, to bring him in the 5th round. Were you surprised that they actually got Jeremiah Trotter Jr., or did you kind of think that maybe he was going to be a draft pick there?
Well, I thought he could be a draft pick, but I thought he'd be gone in the 2nd round.
Okay, I did too. I thought maybe 3rd, 4th.
Coaches and personnel people say, we got him because we never expected that he would drop, that he would be there when we chose. But the fact of the matter is, every projection had him drafted at least 2 rounds higher.
It's very true. I thought 3rd round for sure, and then the 3rd round came, the 4th round came, and then the 5th round overall. Yeah, I totally agree. I want to quickly ask you kind of a fun historical question here. You obviously have received, or were selected and received, the 2024 Pete Rozelle Radio Television Award this year from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. An incredible honor, obviously very well deserving. But I want to take you back to your very first actual official play-by-play call with the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe it's 1977, December 7th. Eagles-Giants. The Eagles won that one 17-14. I did the math. It was 17,024 days ago, or 46 and a half years. Just to kind of put it in perspective, what do you remember from your very first play-by-play call with the Philadelphia Eagles?
Well, it was, number one, it was the most unusual circumstances because Charlie Swift, who had done it for 10 years or so, passed away 4 days earlier. Now, I was not an inexperienced play-by-play guy because I had done play-by-play of Temple football all through college, and then earlier in my career I had done Penn football. So it wasn't like you put somebody in the play-by-play seat and say, figure it out. But I was a long way from being an accomplished play-by-play man, and I also was somebody who, in that season, was sitting in the booth doing the color. Because as surprising as it sounds, Al Pollard, a former Eagle, retired the year before, and they put me in the color job. I had done the pre- and post-game show for 4 or 5 years. So they put me in the color job, and that's different when you're not a former NFL player. But I did a lot of work, a lot of research, and worked hard at it. And when they put me in the seat for the play-by-play guy with 2 games to go in the 77 season, I would be less than honest if I told you that I was confident. I mean, I was nervous. And they had a moment of silence for Charlie Swift before the game, and all 46 players on the sideline turned and faced the broadcast booth, and my knees were clanging back and forth. I said, I hope I can get something out of my mouth. And then the game began, and I lost myself in the game and went into the same zone that I go into now. And got through it, apparently well enough to give me another week to do a game against the Jets at the end of that season. But and then the following spring, they hired me full-time, and I've been there ever since. And I can tell you that I'm still nervous before a game, before every game. I still get the butterflies until my producer, Joe McPeak, cues me and I come on with the first few lines. And then I drop back into that zone where they could light a firecracker in the booth and I wouldn't hear it.
I love it. I've been when I actually put this broadcast out tomorrow on my YouTube channel, I'm going to overlay some of your great calls. I think that there are some incredible moments throughout Eagle history that every Eagle fan knows exactly where they were whenever they heard you make that call. And I was going to ask if you still got nervous, 46 years later from the very first one back on December 7th. Let me ask this: the Super Bowl 52. I mean, obviously you had called a Super Bowl before back in 2004. Was that morning, I mean, is it Christmas morning for you, or is it nerve-wracking dread just wondering if the Eagles are going to be able to pull it off?
I'm more in the part where I'm focusing on my job than on whether the Eagles are going to be pulling it off. I mean, I think about that during the week and all, and I felt that the Eagles were the better team, but they had been the better team when they lost the Patriots previously in a Super Bowl, and I still think they were a better team than the Kansas City Chiefs 2 years ago when they lost to the Chiefs in Super Bowl 57. But so you're not thinking so much in terms of wins and losses. You're thinking of all the things that you hope to bring to the audience, and you're preparing in terms. Actually, you want to know something? It's easier to prepare for a Super Bowl than it is to prepare for a preseason game. Because when you're preparing for a preseason game, you're looking at one of these. This is a roster with 90 players on it. And that's a little bit different than when the Eagles play Baltimore in that first preseason game. I mean, I'm going to be memorizing the names of people who are only known to their mothers. So by the Super Bowl, you can name the starters. You can name everybody almost on the opponent's roster because you've seen they're a good team. I mean, whoever it is, they're still a good team, and they've been on national television. I've seen them 6 or 7 times, as opposed to one of these preseason games where you know that in the fourth quarter, you better have a pile of material and conversational topics to bring up to Mike Quick, because nobody's going to be worrying about the fourth quarter of a preseason game. So what I'm saying is actually the nervousness is there, but not more because it's a Super Bowl. I'm just as nervous before a preseason game.
I love it. I love it. You had two absolutely iconic calls in that Super Bowl. One, obviously, the Philly special. Go ahead.
I do have to tell you that when I'm doing a game, once the game starts, I'm not nervous. I'm absorbed. I am focused. So I'm not nervous. I'm just into it with my job.
3rd down and 10. Pick it back. Here comes the rush. They've got him. Sack number 1. Hassan Reddick. 5.5 on the season.
However, I have to tell you that before the last pass, that last Brady pass at the end of the game with seconds left, I was scared to death. Now, why was I scared to death? It had nothing to do with the game. It had nothing to do with whether the Eagles would win or lose. In my heart and in my head, I didn't think Brady had the arm strength to throw that Hail Mary. I mean, he's great. He's the GOAT. But he didn't have the arm strength of, say, of Aaron Rodgers, who made a habit out of completing Hail Marys. But what I was worried about is we were seated in the far corner of the end zone at U.S. Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. I mean, the newer the stadium, the worse our seats become. And we're in the far corner of the end zone, and I knew that play was going to culminate 110 yards away from where I was sitting. And I didn't want to be known as the announcer who blew the end of the Super Bowl. That was my fear. Could I see it clearly enough? And I have good eyes. But you can't use field glasses. You can't use binoculars on a pass play. You really can't, or you'll lose the ball. I mean, but inexplicably, when he let go of the ball, it was like one of those NFL film sequences where it all slowed down. And I saw it all the way down, and I saw it tipped around, and I saw it hit the ground. I saw every bit of it with crystal clarity. Another thing is, during the week, Paul Domwich of the Inquirer interviewed me, and he said, if the Eagles win, do you have a call? Do you have something that you're going to write down a few sentences because that call is going to last forever and ever? And I said no. And there are announcers who do that, who write down a couple of sentences in case. And I said no. I said, if that happens, I want it to come from my heart. I want it to come from what I feel at that moment. And, for years people have said to me, I used to go on the WIP morning show with Angelo Cataldi, and he'd say, I'd like them to win a Super Bowl for you because of all you've been through. And I've said to him, and this was not disingenuous, I would say to Angelo, you know what? I've had a lot of great thrills. I've had a lot of miracles in the Meadowlands and things like that. I want them to win it for the fans because these fans spend their last dollar. Some of them get second mortgages to buy season tickets. And when Christmas comes, they'll give the last pennies in their pockets to buy their kids Eagles jerseys and memorabilia. So when it occurred and the ball hit the ground, I called the play. I looked up at the clock. I said, the pass is incomplete. The game is over. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. And then what came out was Eagles fans everywhere. This is for you. Let the celebration begin. And that was just from my heart.
He's back again. He steps up. He's hit. He stumbles. He is throwing it deep for the end zone, and it is batted around and incomplete. And the game is over. The game is over. The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you. Let the celebration begin.
There's going to be a parade on Broad Street. Hey, man, if this is a dream, don't wake me up.
Incredible. Honestly, it's like it almost makes me emotional thinking about that moment. I was a young college student interning for Fox in New York City. I watched on this tiny little TV. I had the radio broadcast going in the background as well, and I'm sure you've heard this from everybody, but that call in that moment will go down as maybe one of the best moments of my entire life, up there with my wedding and obviously big moments for myself. I also love the fact that you mentioned...
Let your wife hear that.
No. Hopefully she's not listening. It's right up there. Wedding and then the Super Bowl was, it's as close as it gets. I do love what you said about US Bank Stadium, and newer stadiums are tough to see from. I did play-by-play for my alma mater, the Baylor Bears, in college. I got to call a Baylor-Texas Tech game versus Patrick Mahomes at Cowboy Stadium. Mahomes still waiting to take this snap. Now he takes it. Here comes a blitz. Mahomes looking left, going to throw a deep ball. It's a home run ball into the end zone. It's going to be caught, and that is going to be a touchdown for Texas Tech. And it's crazy how they put you in the far corner, and if they're going the other way, you can't see anything. I can't believe that you were in the far corner of the Super Bowl play.
But that would have been easier because Brad Sham, the Cowboys' fine announcer, told me the first time I came to the AT&T Stadium, he said, once they go past the 40, just look up at the big screen. That's the key there.
It's a good point.
But see, a lot of those places you can't do it because they're not on. I can't look at my monitor because the monitor is no longer in real time. It's delayed. So I've got to go with it.
It's a good point. It's a great point. Yeah, the monitors are delayed, and there's not a lot of big screens like Jerry World has.
There's a part of Hard Rock Stadium where the Dolphins play where we are in a corner of the end zone and we're blocked out from a third of the field. We actually have to have the monitor turned on to real time and call it off the screen.
Wow. It's just amazing how people don't think about that, and yet they listen to you, and you would have no idea that you were blind whenever you were calling a play or something like that.
You know what the best stadium in football is to call a game?
What is it?
Really? MetLife. Yeah, because we're at the 50-yard. Now, the link is also wonderful, but I'm talking about the away stadiums. MetLife has us on the 50-yard line. We're in the right perfect state. We're high enough, but not way up where we're looking at dots. And if have you been to Giants Stadium?
I've not. No, I haven't.
Well, the scoreboards are on the ground level, so that you look behind the Giants bench across the way, and you see the down, the distance, the time, the score, the timeouts, everything. You don't have to go hunting around. That dump in Virginia, where in Landover, Maryland, where the Commanders play. I mean, you can't see the scoreboard. There's an overhang. You're in a corner of the end zone. You're so low that the fans turn around and call you names. That is a mess.
I love it. I love the fact that the Giants have it right there. That way you can reset and give us the down and the distance. Right. Fantastic. I love it. I want to quickly ask you, in terms of play-by-play here, You're 81 years old, 81 years young. You've been doing this for 46 years. I'm sure that,
Okay.
okay, quiet. Yeah, right. But I'm just curious. Is the plan to do this as long as possible? You're the most tenured play-by-play person in the NFL. I'm biased. I think you're the best. I'm curious if you've thought about how this goes in terms of down the line continuing to be the voice of the Eagles.
My answer to you is I want to do it forever. That they're going to have to take a crane and grab me and pull me out of the booth. And I'm yelling, I'm not going. I'm not. No, I want to do it forever. I feel great. My eyesight hasn't changed. Thank goodness my voice is the same. I feel the same. Look, I will tell you that I work hard. I'm on a very rigorous workout schedule. I mean, I lift. I play golf 4 or 5 days a week. I'm really knock on wood. I do the best I possibly can to prepare myself physically for a season. My knees are a little achy, and that came from playing very, very high level tennis years ago. Where as a college student, in the summers I used to play tournaments and play tennis 6.5 hours a day. So I'm not real great running down steps. But other than that, I feel great. And I, as I said, I try. I work hard. I mean, I have certain rules. I try to get a good night's sleep the night before a game. If there's a night game, and this, by the way, Tom, has been going on since game 1 of my career back when I was in my 30s. If there's a night game, I will take a 2-hour nap that afternoon. I will always take a 2-hour nap because for all of us, if you're not rested and you're still doing play-by-play at 11 o'clock at night, you're going to get a little fuzzy. So I try to be rested going into every game. I stay away from the telephone the day before a game. I mean, I may say yes or no or do something quick, but when you're on the phone, you tend to project more. You want your voice to be fresh for 3.5, 4 hours. If I had a game tomorrow, we wouldn't be doing this interview today because I'd be keeping it down. I won't go into a restaurant the night before a game where there's a loud band playing where you have to talk over the music. I've missed some family affairs for that reason because if you strain in these areas, you're not going to have it the next day.
There you go.
So, but in answer to your question, there is no end date. People say, well, this is your 48th. Would you like to do it 50? I'd say I'd like to do it beyond 50. I mean, look, I'm not comparing myself to anybody else, but look, I know that Vince Scully did the Dodgers till he was 90, and so who knows? But you never know what can happen to any of us. I mean, there have been young announcers who have been who have left early, or who have retired for reasons, or who have been retired by their stations. But it's not a field that's known for longevity in a lot of cases. However, my goal is just to do it as long as I physically can.
I love that. I love the insight on it, too. I've never heard you talk about, at least in the interviews I was watching, exactly how dedicated you are in terms of skipping events and not, being in loud rooms and talking on the phone and all the exercise and stuff. It comes across on the broadcast, and I think every single Eagle fan would echo me saying that we hope you're here past 90, 92, 95, 100, whatever it takes. We want you to be here as long as possible.
Thank you.
Yes,
you.
Sir.
I appreciate it.
I want to wrap up quickly. Go ahead.
I just said that's my goal, to do it as long as I possibly can. I've got a great support system. I've got the most wonderful wife in the world who quizzes me on my numbers during the week and makes my breakfast when we're home. She'll make me a big stack of pancakes because when I get to the stadium, I can't look at food. I cannot look at food. So the big stack of pancakes keeps me going until the game is over. Now, Mike Quick eats right through the broadcast. Nothing bothers him. but I'm too nervous to look at food once I get to the stadium. So Cindy makes me a stack of pancakes. And if we're on the road, I do the same thing at the hotel. I have a lot of pancakes so that I don't have to go for food once the game begins.
I love it. I love it. Pancakes fueling the broadcast. How about that for the past 46 plus years? Mr. Reese, I just wanted to just thank you for taking the time. I want to mention quickly.
Merrill, like fine.
Okay, Merrill, I just want to say this. In terms of my personal life and the impact that you've had on me, growing up, there were two big things in my family in terms of Sundays: church first always, and then an Eagles game. And a lot of times living Central Coast, West Coast, my dad was military, we moved a bunch. Your game started right when church was getting out, and so I couldn't get to a TV, and it would be screaming at my parents to turn on, Merrill Reese, let's make sure we find the Eagle broadcast so I can know what's going on with my birds, until we got home in front of a TV. Massive, incredible memories from my childhood, and we still listen. My mom and I love you. We really appreciate you coming on, and we're excited to see what the Eagles do this year.
Thank you. I am excited also. It'll be a fun trip.